Hey, what's up guys? This is a video about small Spyderco knives. This video includes largest to smallest, the Spyderco Para 3, the Sage 5, the Delica, the Native 5, the Astute, and the Chaparral. The Chaparral being the smallest with a 2.7 inch blade, which is 7 centimeters. The other ones have a 3 inch blade, which is 7.5 centimeters. Anything smaller than 7 centimeters, like for instance the Dragonfly, I did not include. So this is only the 3 inch blades basically. Let's do a couple of comparisons real quick. Let's talk about constructions. Obviously the construction, the screws, is quite important for a pocket knife, so just for the longevity. The more you take a knife apart, of course, the more that will be necessary. But I do think, it's a sign of good quality if a knife is constructed well. So we'll rank these real quick in terms of how well I think these are constructed. So this is how I would rank them in terms of screws. I think the Native, Para 3 and the Sage have really good big screws. The Chaparral uses a couple of T6s, still okay. Quality seems to be really good. The Delica can be hit or miss in terms of build quality. You might get a little bit more bobble in the blade, up and down, as you do with many CKCD Spydercos. And then the Astute, I think, just has bad screws. Like, they're just not as nice. They will not strip out super easily, but they're just not as nice. And some of the screws are not accessible because of the pocket clip. That's also a little bit of a downer, and the pivot is rather small. So I would prefer these in terms of screws and construction. If I would disassemble my knives more often, that would be really important to me. In terms of overall build quality, I would rank the Native and Sage the highest, and then just below that the Chaparral and Para 3. There is not a big gap, but there is still a noticeable gap in build quality. The Native, for instance, is the most dialed in backlog that I've ever seen from Spyderco. It's very well tuned in, feels super nice. The Chaparral only comes short here because, it's a little bit thin and the whole construction is a little bit tighter, so it does not feel as refined, but it's still very well built. In terms of the Para 3 and Sage, you definitely notice a difference in build quality. I think the Sage is just the much nicer compression lock. If you want to experience the best compression lock, I think you have to get a Sage. Now these two, even though they are not terrible, they are just not as nice in terms of build quality. You can see some blade centering issues, for instance, with the Chinese Spyderco right here. And then, like I said, on the Delica, there is more blade play up and down. That's just a thing that's present on a lot of CKCD Spydercos, but it is what it is. It's still a good knife. None of these are really bad in terms of build quality, it's just there is a noticeable difference. Now there is a blade stock difference between all of these, from thin to thick. You can see the Para 3 is quite a lot thicker, but the tip is not really stronger than any of these. I think the Native has a really good balance between blade stock thickness and tip strength, and the Astute is just amazing because it's ground so thin but has so much rigidity in the blade still. The Sage has a decently thin spine, but it's not the thinnest behind the edge, so it's not going to cut as well. Delica is really thin, and the Chaparral also. Now we'll rank them in terms of cutting geometry and cutting performance. That was a nice accident. Now in terms of cutting performance, I think the Chaparral is the absolute best of these because of the thin blade stock and thin geometry, and I even convexed my edge slightly. It just cuts like a demon. The Delica is really good because of the thin geometry it has. The Astute is quite surprising because it has such a nice geometry for a budget knife. It is very keen behind the edge, yet it keeps a lot of that blade stock thickness all the way to the tip, so it's robust and slicey at the same time. I just love this blade shape. It is so nice to cut with. I like the Sage quite a bit. I think it could be a lot thinner behind the edge. Maybe this is just Magna Cut, I'm not sure. The Native is good. I like the Sage a little bit better. The Native might be more ergonomic, so in certain cases the Native will outperform the Sage. It really depends on the situation. But overall, I think I like the Sage a little bit better in terms of cutting. And then the Para-Free gets held back a little bit by its blade stock, although it does not cut bad. It's just, you know, it's a little bit weird that this knife is so thick back here. So I think the S2 is just a much nicer, better solution when it comes to strength to slicing ratio. I think it has the nicest thought through blade shape here. And you can also see the cutting edge length of the astute is quite a lot longer, like an insanely amount longer than any of these. So here I rank these knives in terms of cutting edge length. The astute just has a huge advantage by sacrificing handle length though. And then the Sage, Para-Free, Delica, these are very close, these three up here. The Native is quite a bit shorter in cutting edge length. And what's quite surprising to me is that the Chaparral has about the same cutting edge length than the Native, despite being overall a lot smaller. So yeah, this really is like a better slicing Native almost, you could say. Where the Native really shines though is ergonomics. I think this is just a really ergonomic knife, feels really good in hand. The Chaparral is not bad, it's just a little bit on the thinner side and you can definitely notice that. The Delica has a weirdly designed handle, but it still works quite well, just depends on your hand size. I do like the Sage better than the Para-Free ergonomically, because as you can see back here, it leaves a little bit more room than the Para-Free, which has a very abrupt ending. So that's not as nice. Like I said, I like the regular scales more than the skinny mod scales. The astute is really short in handle, so it's not the best grip, but I think I can get enough hand on there to do my cutting tasks, and the blade just performs so well, so it doesn't matter as much. But overall, it will be noticeable, especially with bigger hands. And of course, it really depends what you're cutting, right? Because the compression locks, they will never be as comfortable as a backlock system or a liner lock when cutting hard material like wood. So I think in terms of steel performance, it really depends on your use cases, what you do with the knife, how familiar are you with knife steels, and how good are you at sharpening. So I will not really give a rating for steel here. I have done a lot of videos about steels and I will do so in the future. I'm not sure that the blade steel is the most important thing right here when it comes to the knife choice. I think probably the cutting performance and ergonomics are a little bit more important. And even, for instance, the astute right here only has HCO13 MOV steel. The heat treatment is done really well and the geometry definitely outperforms the steel here. So, steel is not as important as people might say it is. I will give you a quick rundown of the weight of these. This is the Delica, the astute with 2.6 ounces, Para-Free with 3 ounces, Sage with 2.8 ounces, Chaparral with 2 ounces, and the Native with 2.8 ounces. So in terms of carryability, these three on the top definitely are much nicer and better to carry than these three on the bottom, although none of these are really bad to carry. But this ranking also kind of represents how much I like these. These three knives right here, the Chaparral, Delica, and the astute, I think I like a lot better than these three on the bottom. I think they cut nicer, they are easier to carry, and yeah, it's all about that cutting performance for me personally. If you look for an overall little bit more, bigger in size, I guess, I personally like the Sage more than I like the Native and the Para-Free, because I think the Sage is just an improved Para-Free. And when it comes to the Native, the cutting edge is just a little bit too short for me personally. I like to have a little bit more cutting edge available, so I can never finish my cut reliably with this one. I think the cutting edge is too short. On the Para-Free, I don't like the thick blade stock. I think it's a little bit overdone. The astute is really good for the price. It has a fantastic geometry and also blade stock thickness. This one should not be overlooked. This one is really good. The steel performance is also quite surprising for an HCO13 MOV steel. The Delica is an all-time classic. You can never go wrong with a Delica. Quite honestly, this is the most recommendable knife on this list. The Chaparral is just fantastic for slicing performance, not for fidgetability. For fidgeting, you should get one of the bottom ones, and for cutting, you should get one of these. Now, what's my favorite knife from the small Spydercos? Well, quite honestly, it's a knife that's not even on this list. It would be the Spyderco Leaf Jumper, which is just slightly bigger and also discontinued. And quite honestly, the Leaf Jumper beats every single one of these in terms of performance, ergonomics, quite everything. So the Leaf Jumper is my favorite small Spyderco, but like I said, it's discontinued, so I couldn't include it on this list. So the Chaparral and the Delica are definitely my oldest knives here, and I also like them the best. So I guess it's also, you know, what you use is what you like, kind of a thing. Also, I think this old Spyderco, the Chinese Lam, is also one of the best Spydercos in that size range. But again, it's also discontinued. So that's it for this video. Obviously not everybody will be happy with what I said, but that's okay. Thank you guys for watching, and maybe see each other in another video. Goodbye.